people are like desperate for this life, desperate to leave, desperate to travel, desperate to have experiences, but they tell themselves they can't because they've made this choice. It's one or the other, right? We have kids, we stay, we're stuck, or we don't, we give that up, but then we can have life for ourselves. What's your take on that then?
So I think you've got to follow your heart in some way. So we lived in Abu Dhabi, and our kids grew up in Abu Dhabi, or were growing up in Abu Dhabi. They're still growing up. They're only 10 now. It's why I think being an expat can be great, because if you're living overseas and working overseas, then just in holidays, you can explore a different part of the world, because there's, just because the countries that are really close to you, different places become a weekend destination. So, for example, from the Middle East, you can go to India for a long weekend, or Sri Lanka for a long weekend, right? Where you barely can even get to, right? Just being an expat is kind of like a hybrid, I suppose. If you're feeling nomadic but don't quite want to jump in because you want the security and things like that, living overseas and working overseas as an expat is sort of you in Abu Dhabi, there's sand everywhere. It is the desert. And as a stay-at-home, I wanted to be an expat, a stay-at-home mum, basically, and be present for the kids, but I also wanted to earn an income. So I had a part-time job that I did from home. I mentioned to you, touched on before. But it still pulled on my time more than I wanted it to, even though it was 18 hours a week. And I don't know, it kind of hit me through a certain circumstance of events. Why was I spending 18 hours a week working for somebody else when I could spend 18 hours a week growing our property portfolio in the UK from Abu Dhabi? And I was quite realistic about my constraints. And my constraints at the time were my phone couldn't ring because the kids were really little. You can't be taking phone calls when the kids are a little. So I couldn't have my phone ring, and I didn't want to fly back to the UK. So I kind of just decided that I just had to find a way to make it work, because a few different reasons came into play, but I just got this really, really strong, I've got to give this another go. I've got to make it work now, because that would give me more time freedom with this location freedom that we've already got, to live more in the way that I wanted to, and be present for the family.
Yeah,
at the
amazing.
Same
time. And again, I kind of tiptoe around the subject because I'm not a parent, so I don't want to kind of preach, and I don't want people who are parents or families to be listening to this going, what the hell do you know? But my own opinion is, I think I know families who have, chose to travel with their kids and raise them in a way that they feel fit, which sits outside of what society expects. And those kids that I've met, right, have the most incredible set of social skills and people skills and things that, I'm not saying that kids, in the traditional education system aren't going to learn that, but I just think, someone that comes to mind is some people that I know that chose to raise their kids on a tiny, tiny little atoll in Tonga. They bought a resort and they raised them from newborns. And, by the time these kids are walking, they're driving quad bikes, they're pulling out, boat tow hitches, out of the ocean, and they're swimming with whales, and they're, and it's nuts, and they're kite surfing, and they're just so amazing kids. So I think it can absolutely work. I don't, and I also think, while we're on the topic, we'll get off it, but I think that I can go on about it, but the traditional education system now is so archaic, right? Kids are learning things that aren't even relevant in today's world. So I think that's for a whole nother podcast, but I think what you're doing is amazing, really, really inspiring. And I hope that other people who are listening to this can look at you and see the fact that you're doing it with your kids, and it maybe opens the door for them as well.